I never believed in ghosts or curses, or that objects could hold a spirit's anger or sorrow. But I'm not so sure anymore, not after what happened last month when I went to that estate sale. It started as a dare from a friend. He told me there was an old mansion just outside of town, abandoned for decades, with the owner's things still inside. No one wanted to buy it because of the stories, strange deaths, sightings of lights in the windows, screams that no one could explain. But I was curious. I wanted to see if those rumors were true. So, one Saturday afternoon, I decided to check it out. I convinced myself I'd find a few creepy trinkets and maybe spook myself a bit. But what I found was far worse. The house was just as decayed as I'd expected. Inside, it smelled of dust and rot, and every floorboard creaked as I stepped through empty rooms, pushing aside curtains that hadn't seen daylight in decades. And then I found it, the mirror. It stood alone in an upstairs bedroom, tall and dusty, with an ornately carved frame of dark wood that gleamed as though it had been recently polished. It was strange, almost out of place in the decayed room. Something about it pulled me in, like it had been waiting for me, and I couldn't look away. I moved closer, studying the intricate carvings in the wood. Tiny, twisted faces, their mouths open in silent screams. And then I saw my reflection. At least, I thought it was my reflection. But as I got closer, the person in the mirror, a perfect copy of me, began to change. Its eyes were empty, hollow, and a slow, chilling smile spread across its face. I stepped back, and it disappeared. I told myself I'd imagined it, that it was just a trick of the light or dust. But something in me needed to have that mirror. I had to know what I'd seen. So I bought it. I knew it was a terrible idea, but I brought it back to my apartment, telling myself I'd figure out what was wrong with it, maybe sell it to some collector afterward. But that night, the first night I had it in my room, I woke up around 3 a.m., freezing, feeling like someone was in the room with me. When I looked at the mirror, I saw it again. That reflection that wasn't quite me, only this time it was closer, just inches from the glass, its hands pressed against it like it wanted to reach through. And then it started tapping, tap, tap, tap. At first, I thought it was something outside, but the sound came from the mirror. And with every tap, it smiled wider until its mouth stretched impossibly far, and a dark, hollow space gaped where its throat should be. I couldn't look away. I couldn't move. Hours passed like that, me frozen in bed, staring at the mirror until morning light filled the room, and the figure faded back into my reflection. I told myself I'd get rid of it that day, but when I tried to move the mirror, it was as if it had fused to the wall. I couldn't budge it, not an inch. That night, I tried covering it with a sheet, but when I woke up, the sheet was gone, lying neatly folded at the foot of my bed. And there it was again, waiting. For the next week, the mirror would wake me at exactly 3 a.m. Every night, the figure in the glass got closer, its eyes becoming more like mine, its face becoming more like mine. One night, it pressed its hand against the glass, and when I looked at my hand, I saw dark smudges, like fingerprints, burned into my skin. And then the dreams started. In every dream, I was in that house again, in front of the mirror, only this time it was different. The faces carved into the wood were moving, watching me, whispering, calling me to step through the glass. One night, I woke up standing in front of the mirror, my hand pressed to the glass as if trying to pull myself in. I knew if I didn't get rid of it, I'd end up trapped, or worse. In desperation, I drove back to the mansion and left the mirror outside the front gate. But when I returned home, it was there, waiting in my room, with the same horrible smile on its face. Now every night, I wake up staring into my own eyes, watching my reflection, watching me back. And I know, someday soon, it's going to take my place. I knew I should never have returned to that house, but curiosity, that age-old temptation, got the better of me. I'd grown up in that house, or rather, I'd survived it. It was a sprawling, crumbling Victorian mansion, long abandoned, with rumors hanging over it like thick fog. My father had died there. I was barely 5 years old when I found him in that red-walled room. He was hunched over his desk, his face frozen in terror, his eyes staring at something only he could see. No one believed me when I said the walls were moving. 20 years later, I went back. I don't know why. Maybe it was the pull of unfinished business, or the half-forgotten memory of something I should have never seen. But the moment I stepped onto that property, I felt it again. The cold prickling down my spine, the hollow silence that clung to every corner of the house. It was as if the house itself was watching me. The front door opened with an eerie ease. It was unsettling how little it had changed. Dustier, yes, and emptier, but just as oppressive. Shadows lurked in the hallways, and every step I took echoed, as if the house was welcoming me, mocking me. I made my way to the study, the red room. I hadn't been able to shake its image all these years. The walls a deep crimson red, velvet drapes thick with dust, and that old wooden desk still standing, just as my father had left it. But this time, the air felt thicker, heavier, like it was waiting for me. The first strange thing I noticed was the smell, metallic, sharp, like iron. The second was the cold, creeping up from the floorboards, seeping into my bones. As I approached the desk, I saw something glinting in the dim light. There, resting exactly where my father had sat, was his old journal. I should have left it alone, but I couldn't. I opened it, expecting to see his usual meticulous notes and sketches, but the pages were blank, except for one near the end. Written in his hurried scrawl were the words, "Do not look at the walls." It was absurd. Yet the moment I read those words, I could feel it, an itch, a pull, like a pair of invisible hands turning my head. My eyes drifted to the walls, and there, in the crimson paint, were the faintest impressions. Faces, mouths, twisted in silent screams. And they were watching me. I tried to look away, but my body felt rooted to the spot. The faces began to move, slowly at first, as if awakening from a long sleep. And then they started whispering. The whispers grew louder, blending into a single, dissonant chant. The words were unclear, but the tone was desperate, pleading. I closed my eyes, but the voices grew sharper, cutting into my mind like splinters. Suddenly, I felt something cold touch my shoulder. I jerked around, but no one was there. Only the empty room, drenched in the eerie red light. But I wasn't alone. I knew that now. The faces were closing in, the whispers filling every inch of the room, seeping into my skin. I stumbled back, desperate to escape, but the door wouldn't budge. It was as if the house had locked me in. Then I heard it, a faint scratching coming from the floorboards beneath me, and the whispers stopped. Silence fell over the room, thick and suffocating. The scratching grew louder, more frantic. I watched in horror as the floorboards began to crack, splinters flying. Slowly, a hand, pale and twisted, reached through the gap, clawing its way up. I staggered back, but it was too late. The thing pulled itself out, a grotesque figure, its skin stretched too tight, its eyes hollow, and its mouth twisted into a sickening grin. It crawled toward me, its movements jerky, unnatural, like a puppet on strings, and then it spoke in my father's voice. "Welcome home." The lights flickered, and in that moment, I saw them, all of them. Faces, bodies, emerging from the walls, the floor, the ceiling, all staring, all reaching. And that's when I realized I was never supposed to leave this place. It had waited all these years, patiently, until I returned. Now, the house had me, and it wasn't going to let me go.